All right, we are back in. Thank you for listening. Gridiron 360, Dave and Bill, talking 2020 NFL draft prospects from the Southeastern Conference. And we are talking cornerbacks, just dropped the top four. C.J. Henderson from Florida, Trayvon Diggs from Bama, Christian Fulton, LSU, Cameron Dantzler, Miss State. We move on to, we're going to, again, talk probably about 2 or 3 more guys and then drop the rest of the 2, possibly 3 guys, and that will be all the cornerbacks out of the SEC eligible this year for the draft. This next guy is from Trussville, Alabama, a junior from Auburn University, Noah Igbinoghene. That's how you say it, folks. Noah Igbinoghene. He is 5'10", $198, 31 3/4 inch arms, 9 3/8 inch hands. He ran a 4.48 at the combine, only threw 15 reps up on the bench, but his vertical is outstanding. 37-inch vertical, also a 128-inch broad jump. He can go up and get it. Talk to me a little about Mr. Igbinoghene, because he was pretty stellar. Again, great team, best conference, best division, stellar competition, and this guy has lived up to, quite frankly, I think he's lived up to the billing.
Yeah, he's – okay, so here I go back to the front. This is the one front, I think, in the SEC that was dominant.
In the country.
Yeah, in the country.
I don't care what games they lost or how many or whatever. I mean, you know, keep in mind they did have a true freshman running that offense, okay?
Yep.
And the offense helps the defense helps the offense, and round and round we go. But you're absolutely right. That defensive front was mad.
All right, I'll start with this, which is usually not where you start with a corner, but I will say I like his physicality.
Yeah.
He's not a real tall guy. What is he, 5'11", 5'10"? 5'10", 198, so he's stocky.
Mm-hmm.
He's quick in small spaces. He's got a kind of a little bit of a nasty streak in him. To me, to be honest with you, everything I've seen about this guy screams nickel corner to me. Playing inside, just roughing up a receiver across the middle, being able to come down in some run support and make some sure tackling. That's the kind of thing I see out of this kid. Just playing in small space. I don't know that I'm going to see this kid running down the field with anybody, consistently. I don't know. I just don't see it when I look at him. Their secondary overall was okay. And here's why, with as good as their pass rush was, I just expect more big plays overall. This, to me, is probably the best player coming out in their secondary. Remember, they got 2 safeties and another corner coming out, so they're bringing some guys out this year. I think this is the best of the bunch from Auburn's secondary. I just kind of see him playing there. I like that he's physical. He might be able to do more playing outside with some of the slower receivers. But I like a guy that can play with a little bit of nastiness in the secondary. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm just thinking about his height and his weight and the fact that he is very quick in small spaces. That's just kind of what I see out of him.
Well, he this past year he started all 13 games. He had 42 tackles, 1 for loss, 7 pass breakups. Was a kick returner. Had 9 returns for 372 yards, and 1 of those for a TD. This is a guy that I agree with you. I think that he's got a lot of power, especially when you're talking tackling, but not a lot of, as a corner, you don't always have to be just power. You got to have a little bit of athleticism, I don't know, finesse, So putting him down, and as opposed to the other guys where that we talked in the last cast who have, their eyes are pretty good. I worry about his eyes sometimes, but if you're kind of playing that nickel corner, you don't necessarily have to be as concerned about a guy's eyes. I mean, it's not that you don't want it to be bad, but more times than not, he's covering underneath shallow stuff rather than guys going by him. That is a concern, but I think this is a player when we talk about, again, guys that can earn a spot on the roster, playing special teams.
Who he already has.
Yes.
And he's got and the thing you want is you want fearlessness and physicality out of your special teams guys,
Yes.
at least until we get rid of the kickoff returns. But this is a guy that could go and do that and do it in several ways, not just in, as a returner, but can do it as a gunner. Like, this is kind of that guy. He could be at that, and that's your worst case scenario. That gives you time to develop him while still being able to put some value on the field.
Sure.
Which you can't have guys that do one thing in the NFL anymore unless they are just elite at their position.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a tough kid. He appears to be a hardworking kid. Hopefully that'll translate in the NFL and he can make a little bit of a career. I don't know if he'll become a starter, but if he does, maybe more, like you said, inside. But even if he's not a starter, guys get hurt a lot in the NFL. You rotate guys in. He definitely can earn a spot as, for some depth on the team, especially right
Yeah, and one thing to say about Malzahn's teams is he hasn't always had the most talented players in the SEC over the last, 5 whatever years he's been there, 5-6 years. But he has had some guys that are tough. He's had some tough players. They don't always translate great into the pros, but there's toughness. And this kid's got some athleticism, and I like that to go with that toughness.
Here's an interesting thing. He's the son of 2 Olympic-caliber track athletes from Nigeria. His mother won the bronze medal in the Nigerian 4x100 relay in 92 and finished 5th with that team in 96. His father went to Miss State, won 5 SEC titles in long and triple jump, and Noah himself also did track in high school. He broke the Alabama state record in the triple jump. So he's from an athletic background, maybe not necessarily football, but
well, and when you talk about track and field, and you get to some of those countries in Africa, Nigeria, like Kenya, with them, those are some serious athletes. So good blood there.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to the next guy. Let's see, from Alabama. From Kentwood, Louisiana, a senior out of the Alabama Crimson Tigers, Mr. Shaheem Carter, 5'10", $194, 29 5/8 inch arms, 9.5 inch hands. Let's see. He had in 2018 had a sports hernia injury, had surgery on it, was able to come back this past season. He was a starter for 11 of the 13 games, had 43 tackles, 2.5 for loss, 1 pick, 7 pass breakups.
Yeah, this is kind of how I look at him is, I was talking a lot about Trayvon Diggs and just how I feel about his abilities. This is a guy that, when you're kind of second fiddle, I kind of look at him and go, I guess the way I see him is kind of a jack of a few trades, not really the master of any. Like, nothing really about him is like amazing.
Yeah.
But you think about
smaller.
Yeah, you think about like the number 2 corner on any NFL team, and I don't even think he's really that. I see this guy being more like, I don't even know if he'd be a nickel. Maybe more of like a dime guy, an extra guy, just because there's nothing really flashy about him. There's no particular part of his play that kind of says, okay, you fit him in here. Kind of like how we were talking about the last guy, is that he kind of just, he's got a game. Like his game is particular, but he's got a game. This guy, he's a good player. I think he'd probably be near the end of the draft, maybe even undrafted, but he's the kind of guy that really, when I look at it, I don't know if I really see a ton of extra in him. He's not extra at anything.
Well, I mean, look, man. I mean, it is Bama, so he's a good player. He's well coached, but we just talked about one of the top corners, Trayvon Diggs from Bama.
Yep.
Yesterday we were talking some safeties. We talked about one of the top safeties in the class,
Yep.
Xavier McKinney from Bama. So he had a lot of help in the secondary back there, and I don't know if it's a who made who situation. The one interesting thing, you mentioned it before we started off, there has been inklings of him shooting up some draft boards a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not really sure
I don't know why, but
he's not big and he's not particularly fast. And I look at that and I'm trying to figure out where to go from there. So I guess that's just kind of where I see him at right now. I think anytime you talk
get
about
picked
stat.
up.
Probably. I mean, whether he gets drafted or not, that's going to be the quiz. Here's the problem: is sometimes you're a good player, but sometimes there's not a fit for you somewhere, and that is kind of where I see him. When you start getting into, like we talked about with, I'm going to mess his Igbenogany.
Noah Igbenogany. Igbenogany.
All right, thank you. We talk about him.
Hooked on phonics. Get some, Dave.
All right.
Come on.
So here,
you can't sound off a Nigerian last name. What's wrong with you?
Whatevs. But he's like, you mentioned
Travarius Taxeritrix.
You need to put that on the website. That is hysterical. But this is a guy that, you talked about his special teams ability. I guess I see something and I always try to envision, like, where would I put him in? Where would I insert him? And I don't know that I see it. So again, I'm not trying to bag on him, but you really, if you're going to find a niche in the NFL, you got to be special at something. I just am struggling to figure out what that guy is. And there's always, again, we talked about Bama teams. There have been Bama guys that have not done much in the pros because you find out, you're like, oh my God, well, they were next to so-and-so and they were next to this guy and played in front of this guy or played behind this guy. And it's just, this might be one of those guys that's just a good, solid player, but just might be a little harder for him to carve out a role in the NFL. Okay. So anyway, we're probably going a little too long on that, but we got a few other guys that we may hear about.
Yep.
Why don't you run through them?
Yeah. First of all, a redshirt senior from Jacksonville, Florida for the Auburn University
Duval!
Mr. Javaris Davis on the smaller end at 5'8", $183, 35/8-inch arms, 8 7/8-inch hands. Ran a 4.39 40. Okay. Only threw up 11 on the bencher. 35.5-inch vertical. Let's see. He was. I think his play in his career, because he is, a redshirt senior, got better every year, which is what I like to see. He progressed. He was, I think his play this past year really is what kind of turned him on for the NFL scouts. 13-game starter, recorded 43 tackles. He had 1 for loss. He had a couple picks, 6 pass breakups. Excuse me. This is a guy that... again, we talked about that defensive front at Auburn being really good, and that helps the back end. A little smaller of a guy. Here's an interesting note. He is the cousin of former NFL players Vernon and Vontae Davis. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
You did not know that, but now you do. Let's see. Anything else? This is a guy, he's fast, dude. I mean, obviously, but it's not just his straight line speed. I've seen a couple pieces of tape on him where he wasn't exactly on a receiver or somebody got by him. He's got the ability to speed to catch up. Athletic dude. He's got good feet, good body control, good speed. He's smaller. He's smaller. And, not that he's going to have a lot of guys coming out to necessarily block him unless it's a receiver, but if he does, that can cause problems. If he's got a good, especially in today's NFL, I mean, they look for wide receivers who can block. And if he's got a wide receiver that gets his hand on him, sometimes he gets a little stuck. And that creates open holes. And the speed of the NFL... You can't have that. You just can't, just a split second of a hole and a guy will find his way through and he's already past you.
Yep. You got next.
All right.
You kind of just threw it out there. We're not going to spend a lot of time.
All right. 2 more guys we got that we want to mention. Kid from Dallas, Texas, senior for the Missouri Tigers at 6'2", $195, Mr. DeMarcus Acey. Let's see his stats this year. He had 15 total tackles, 12 solo. He had fumble recovery, 5 passes defensed. Taller guy. 6'2". You're looking for that tall corner. Again, these are names of guys that we expect to, whether it's late or undrafted, hopefully they'll get picked up. But these are all the guys at the cornerback position eligible for the draft out of the SEC. One more guy, Debione. I don't know.
Debiani
Renfro.
Debo
Played for the Texas A&M Aggies, a junior out of Pearland, Texas, at 6'2", $198. He posted 33 tackles this past year. 21 of those were solo, had half a sack, fumble recovery, 4 passes defense. Again, along the lines of those taller cornerbacks in terms of physical attributes. Also played on a team that, again, best conference, best division, SEC West. Had to play Alabama, Auburn, LSU, even Ole Miss, who can get, downfield sometimes. So, and this year in particular, as we have said in previous casts, there was, expected even potential dark horse Heisman for their quarterback to take a big jump this past year, and that's Kellen Mond, and he regressed this past year. So the fact of the matter is the offense did not help this defense very much, and there's not a ton of dudes on there. So he was, was a definite piece, and could be a definite piece that could be picked up potentially.
Yeah. Hard depth. I have to say the hard part for A&M was, and you and I obviously we watched them certainly early on because they played your Clemson Tigers, was that they were a victim to probably one of the, if not the toughest schedule in college football this year.
Was the toughest. Yeah.
But the other part was they just didn't look all that impressive when they did get beat, but they got beat by some heavy hitters. I mean, you had 2 teams in the college football playoff who have amazing stars on the outside. You had Alabama, who was probably option 5, maybe 6 going into that. Yeah. And they have 3 guys that are probably going to get drafted in the first round at the receiver.
And that's just guys that are going to be drafted.
Yeah. So it's, in fairness to them, some of that is there. I just, this is a guy that they didn't impress. I think because I think everybody looked for them because there was so much talk about them to take the next step and at least knock off one of these, maybe even 2 of these teams. And they never really. They didn't. Like their game against Clemson, it wasn't a close game. The score was massively closer than what the game really was.
Sure.
I mean, Clemson, you guys just took them.
Yep.
So I think that again, I'm only saying that just to give an idea that when I think people looked at A&M, I think A&M probably got a short end of the stick. And don't get me wrong, I loved it watching Jimbo Fisher lose.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a kid again. He's a redshirt senior, so he's not a one-hit wonder. He's a guy that he's got the physical tools. Can he translate that in his game on the field? I don't know.
I'd call him an undrafted free agent.
Maybe an undrafted free agent.
With the hope of maybe developing something. I mean, it wouldn't be the first one. We've seen undrafted free agents start in their first year. So, you never know. But I'm not saying that this is the guy, but just that's probably where he falls.
Okay. Guess what?
We're done
with the SEC. Good. Get those punks out of here.
God, if ever I didn't want to spend the most time on a conference, it was the SEC. But we got to give them their props. They had the players.
They have the players. They have crazy depth. So we will move on next to the Big Ten. And hopefully we don't have to go by position groups. I think you've heard me say before, the Big Ten, I think, has the most prospects for this year's draft in terms of value overall. The SEC has the most in terms of just depth, just tons of guys that are going to be able to at least get a look from teams. So we will move on there next and see you next time
on the gridiron.
See ya!